Welcome to MATCHplay, where every episode starts with a spark and ends with insight that can only come from personal experience at the highest level. Let's tee up some good conversation. I'm Thad Miller, and welcome back to MATCHplay. Today's conversation is about understanding the language behind selling a business. Our guest is Matt Howard, Director in the Transaction Advisory Services Group at Blue & Company, which is a top 20 healthcare CPA firm. Matt specializes in business valuation, quality of earnings, transaction due diligence, supporting hundreds of deals each year across all healthcare markets and other business markets too. He's a CPA, an accredited business valuation and certified valuation analyst. More importantly, he's someone who lives inside the numbers that drive deals, seeing what holds up, what falls apart, and what actually determines value. In this conversation about EBITDA, quality of earnings, deal structures, and what those terms really mean when your business is on the line. So, Matt, welcome. Great to have you, my friend.
Thanks, Thad.
Every episode of MATCHplay starts with a spark, a literal match strike. When the flame burns out, I'll ask a series of rapid-fire questions. You don't have your matches, and you're probably nervous about your sprinkler system if you light this off at the Blue & Company National Headquarters. So I'm going to do it here. Got my trusty matches here from Lido, which is a pretty sweet golf course up in Wisconsin. Here we go. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Okay. What was your first job, Matt? Job, even as a kid?
I mowed for a developer.
Yeah.
So I mowed big old lots that were empty.
All right. Push mow, or did you have a righty?
No, at the ripe age of 16, aka when I could get my license, I was driving a truck and a trailer with a big John Deere with the rollover bar around. I don't know what that business owner was thinking.
Do you still have all your fingers and all your toes?
I do, thankfully.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, who's your favorite golfer, since we have a little bit of golf theme here with our podcast?
I'm going to let you guess. I started my career at KPMG, and there was this guy named Phil that sponsored us, and so he's really been my favorite since then.
Yeah. I doubt they'd want to do his books right now.
Fair enough.
Okay. All right. Hardest financial class you took in school or post-grad?
Statistics. I don't know why. That one bugged me, and I work in statistics all the time. Doesn't bug me anymore. I have no idea why, but maybe it was the professor.
All right. Well, Matt, you work inside hundreds of transactions every year, helping determine what business is actually worth. Obviously, everybody has an opinion to some degree, but you're trying to nerd out on the numbers and let them know, in general, what we're talking about. So before we get into deal structures, let's give us a little background on Blue & Company and your role there and your entire team.
Yeah. So we have a lot of fun in this world. We've got about 30 business valuators firm-wide. And again, we're a top 60 CPA firm with a top 20 niche in healthcare. So we do, $180 million of revenue a year. Half of it's healthcare. So a lot of what we do is in the healthcare world. And that's where I spend predominantly most of my time. However, we've got valuators that work in the construction verticals or the ag verticals and all those different venues. And so with that said, we are just weird CPAs. I got my friends next door working on tax returns. We work on deals, both private sales and into the middle market and more of that private equity or more in that investment value type arena.
Okay. All right. So, all right. One of the questions, and I may even title this, WTF is EBITDA. So what is EBITDA? That comes up all the time. It's been over the last 10 years, it's been a strong word in the financial services business. Give us a sense of that. If somebody's never heard of it or if they've heard of it, give us, the novice and the professional view of that.
Well, first of all, if you're really sophisticated, you call it EBITDA. If you're really fancy, okay?
Is that like,
if you're like
finance and finance? There's two different ways. The people that know it's finance, right? And the people that know it's EBITDA.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm more of an EBITDA guy myself, and I mean, you can get the book answer all day, every day. Basically, the way I try to boil it down, especially for those owners of a business that don't live in the finance world, it's a way to measure basically beyond any job that the owner brings to the table. What is the benefit of owning the business? Before, I don't care about your debt service or what kind of debt you got. So it's before debt. And I don't care what kind of state income or federal income taxes you pay either. So it's before taxes. And it's really before replacing that equipment. That's the part of it. So again, I think it's just really measuring that outcome, that financial metric before those things come into play.
Okay, so you're trying to get a baseline on the business, and then there's multiples, right? I mean, that's so like, what does that mean by a multiple of EBITDA? Give us a sense of that.
So you have two variables, right? If you're just trying to boil down a transaction into these two different buckets, the EBITDA is saying, hey, what is the benefit of owning the business above and beyond, the job that is being done by the owner? The second is saying that, hey, if we're looking at, let's say, a private equity group that's doing a transaction, right? They're going to say, well, we'll pay you 5 turns or 5x of EBITDA for your business. So that's what they mean is they measure the profitability and then they apply a multiple to it. And that's them saying this is the value proposition we see in your business.
What are they often missing behind that number and multiples and so forth? I mean, how does that articulate through a deal process?
Sure. And, the first thing that I see that gets missed or does not get understood by our business owners. And again, disclaimer, if you say this to anybody, they're going to absolutely laugh at you because I've made this up and it's not a real thing, but I call it EBITDA. Okay.
EBITDA.
And
okay.
It's NC at the end. So basically saying owner, it's not just what falls to the bottom line. It's after normalizing your compensation or any other family member's compensation inside the business. You may pay yourself way too much. You may pay yourself not enough. We got to normalize the owner out because a lot of owners think, hey, I have $1 million profitability business, aka I can bring home $1 million. What they're not measuring is what is their contribution and what would it take if they hired somebody to replace the administrative oversight, if it's a doctor's office, a physician component. That's what a lot of owners miss in this analysis.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So in that regard, there's add backs. That's another word. What's an add back? Where do you see owners, go astray in regards to add backs and things?
Yeah, great question. So an add back is saying, look, if you're in a small business, there can be some messy financials. So there may be, let's say, a lot of small business owners just had, the last iteration of Windows, is no longer being serviced. So they had to upgrade all their PCs or their computers to the newest iteration. So they had to spend, let's say they had, 15 terminals. They had to spend $40,000 on new computer equipment. Now, if that happens every year, that wouldn't be an add back, but it doesn't. Usually Windows has a 10-year life cycle for all their services. And therefore we would massage that or take the brunt of that out of saying, hey, you don't have to do that every year. If they expensed it, we would add it back and normalize it. So one category is one-time expenses that don't occur in the future.
Got it. Okay. Or if there's any personal expenses, when you own your own business, you can take people take extra trips and they're with their family, but they write it off. They need to restack that deck sometimes too, correct?
Exactly. And then so one is that one-time expense that would not occur in the future. We need to parse that out. Second is, like you said, personal expenses or extensions of the way that they pay themselves through the business, right? And that is sometimes through an automobile. Sometimes it's through rent paid to another entity in excess of market rent. All these things we got to calibrate and understand in order to get to that true EBITDA or EBITDA.
Okay. All right. EBITDA. We're going to trademark that,
That's
Matthew. Right. If it gets used, you get a penny. Okay. Now we're moving on to quality of earnings. This is really just kind of a vocabulary lesson for anybody listening that is looking to sell their business. What is quality of earnings report? What is that?
So when you are posturing towards what I would say a more strategic buyer or a private equity backed buyer or consolidator, anybody in the private equity world is not going to necessarily want something called a business valuation, where it basically, a business valuation to me simulates another you owner coming in and coming behind you and taking
That's
it
fair.
over.
Yeah.
A quality of earnings is really trying to get as nerdy as us CPAs can possibly get when it comes to defining, supporting, speaking the language of our bigger transactions, that EBITDA, right? Because again, it sounds simple. It sounds like, yeah, I could calculate that in 2 minutes. You'd be surprised at the nuances. Be surprised at all the various ways that you can parse out, get to that true EBITDA of the business.
And that report, that Q of E, this is from the buyer's side. They're trying to prove that it is what it is. And what are they actually trying to confirm in a Q of E, in a quality of earnings?
So think of let's say we had $10 million, Thad, you and I, and we were funding some sort of enterprise to go out and buy businesses, and we'd be the investment committee, right? Mm-hmm. The investment committee, our job is to make sure that money is utilized well. And we want to make sure we really understand what we're buying. So for example, if there was a special order widget that was way outside the industry norm in a year, or the life cycle of that business, and it was a huge contract, it will never happen again, or at least it hasn't happened in the last 20 years. Guess what we're looking at is what is the quality of these earnings? Because if we just look at that 1 year and we see all this gobs of money flowing through the business, we're like, oh, this is going to be an awesome business. But if that doesn't play out year after year, if that's a once in every 10-year experience, guess what? The quality of that earnings in that year is questionable. So it's not just formulaic. It's kicking the tires into the metrics behind the business. Do they support those earnings that came up through the EBITDA?
That's a great description. So where do deals start to fall apart, during this process of Q of E?
Well, let's be honest. The first thing that falls apart is deal fatigue. This is a full-time job on top of a full-time job, unless you got the right team behind you, right? So I would say first and foremost, a lot of owners will maybe try to engineer this themselves. And what they'll quickly find is, hey, you got a sophisticated buyer on the other side, and you're trying to do all this yourself and trying to answer all the questions in the Q of E, because let's be honest, the only way we can support the numbers is through excruciating diligence and making sure we really understand the numbers and the outcome and the support behind them.
So, I mean, obviously that's where it's important to have an advisor. If you're a seller, it'd be like, me playing Scotty Scheffler in golf. You know what I mean? That'd be like a seller, looking to get purchased by people that do this all the time, that buy all the time. Scotty Scheffler plays golf all the time. I might play once a week. He's got a little more talent than me also in this arena. I'm good at running my business, but I'm not good at valuing or negotiating or understanding these terms. That's where, having somebody on your side to kind of work through this, to bring that, you don't want to be in bring a knife to a gunfight.
Exactly. I mean, think about these people. They probably came from some investment banking, and they've done this for many years, and they know exactly how to stack play skins, and they're the ringer, and nobody knows the ringer when you're playing skins. But when you find out after the whole, the turn, oh crap, I'm down a lot of money because I'm playing against somebody that, I should have checked their handicap closer, right?
Right. There you go.
All that to say is, yeah, that's the same element. Sitting across the table from a team with counsel behind them, a legal team with financial nerds like me, all stacking the deck in the best way they can. Again, they're not trying to always screw you over, but they're also trying to set themselves up for success.
Yeah, for sure. So if someone's a few years away from selling, thinking about all of this, what are some advice you would give them to prepare for this, this due diligence that's going to happen on their business?
Yeah. Business ownership is a full-time job, and stepping back and being strategic is a superpower in any business. As a CPA owner, I feel that angst all the time of when's the last time that I thought about managing the business instead of just reacting to all the activity? So intentionality, thoughtfulness, starting early are superpowers in this world. It's the owners that wake up, they get something in the mail saying, hey, I want to buy your business. They get all excited because they throw out some numbers, and all of a sudden what they've done is they've accidentally gone through the transaction process. Whereas if they were intentional, got the right team together, stacked the cards as best as they can while being completely forthright and truthful, that is how you take this thing that has been part of your legacy, part of your history, part of your financial world. That's how you get the betterment out of it than just accidentally selling.
Yeah. Well done. Well done. So, okay. So we're through the Q of E. The buyer's still interested. We've got our kind of EBITDA dialed in. Then it gets into structure. Structure is such a critical piece, no matter what you think you're going to get, what you talked about. Here's more vocab for us. Joint venture and holdco. What's the difference? What are those?
Right. So if you think about getting a couple different offers and thinking, well, it's obviously always going to be the highest offer that you take, right? Right? No, not always, right? Because structure is just as meaningful as anything else. I mean, some friends in the industry that I work in say, hey, I'll pay you 20x your EBITDA if I can structure the deal, because structure is the prism of risk of your deal. So look at the outcome through the risk perspective. And what I mean by that is saying, look, if I'm getting 60% cash at close on my deal, guess what? I'm 60% de-risked. And then that terminology comes to play. What happens to the other 40%? Well, if we have joint venture equity, that means you retain ownership in your business and haven't given it up yet. So it means you get ongoing profits from the business, right? Because you still own 40% or whatever the numbers are. That's the joint venture. It's basically maintaining ownership stake in the existing business or iteration of the existing business. That's joint venture equity. Rolled equity or holdco equity is basically you joining the mothership that is acquiring you and getting units in some sort of ownership interest of something bigger than your business itself. And again, there's a lot of different structures out there. That's boiling it down to the 101 level.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And then why aren't more deals being structured just as a full clean exit versus having this holdco and joint venture?
Well, and that is the fun. And that's where, you look at the menu of options that you have. You gotta understand what your tolerance is. You gotta understand what your trajectory of your business is. And this is why starting that early is so huge, because more time typically, right, gives you more options. And, an option where you are completely de-risked, you sell your business and you move off into the sunset. If that meets your financial goals, guess what? That can be a better option than a higher deal where you have ongoing angst, ongoing risk of the performance of the business. How it performs after the transaction may indicate if you get that second bite of the apple of that rolled equity or that joint venture equity. So if you want more control, 100% transactions fun. If you want more upside, guess what? These other deal structures can be meaningful.
Potential upside. And that's
potential upside.
Yeah, and I think it's important to get to know the people you're dealing with, because they're going to have more of the control. You're giving up control in either of these situations, obviously. So structure is the prism of risk. I love that, Matt Howard. That was good. I got that on my little quote pad here.
I'm going to quote myself. That's the first time I've ever said that.
I love it. Okay. So what do business owners, again, you do valuations, you're involved in Q of E's, you're calculating EBITDA, you do hundreds of these a year, and you have a team that does hundreds of them a year. What do owners most often misunderstand about valuation?
Well, anytime you try to value a person's baby, understand there's going to be an emotional concept here. I mean, again, my job in evaluation, and if we're doing fair market value, my job is to actually be the voice of reason, to give you a platform of understanding of what your business is worth. And then if I'm ticking you off a little bit, probably doing my job correctly, because evaluation should find that friction point between buyer and seller and come up with a value that ticks off both sides just a tick. And that's not easy to do. And my wife says I'm very good at it sometimes, ticking off everybody in the process. But that's besides the point. Is that valuation should be walking that line.
That's great. Okay. So lastly, some advice. Obviously, you are involved in these transactions. You're third party. So you're not representing the buyer. You're not representing the seller. You're representing the value. What's some great advice you could give sellers now, as they look forward?
Yeah, get first and foremost, get your full team behind you. Get your CPA on the same line as your broker, as your investment advisor. Get your team to work together, because as professionals, that's where we actually deliver the best value, is when we are working together as a team, working together to make sure that you are planning well. And that means that your numbers are clean before you go to the transaction. They're not a mess. That's your CPA. Making sure that you have a reasonable platform for valuation, that you can retire confidently if that's your end goal, or if you're going to start the next business up. But talk to your investment advisor. They can guide you there. And then making sure that you are getting in front of the right buyer pools. Talk to your broker. I mean, again, that's where the synergy happens. When we work together, great things come, but that takes intentionality. It takes starting early, and that takes professionals helping you typically.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well said. Okay. Before we close every round of match play, I know you work very diligently. You've got a young family. You don't play a lot of golf, but do you have any golf tips in your head that you've been given in the past or you're working on lately? That's part of this match play podcast. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So you're right. I don't play as much as I used to, but 3 kids will ruin you in that way. But, life, society, it's all over the place. We're constantly looking around, finding the next new shiny thing or distraction. To me, I just got to keep my head down. I got to simulate where I'm striking the ball, because man, my head wants to turn and start looking where it's going to end up.
Love it. So keep your head down, and keep your head down as you own your business too. I mean, that's a good analogy. Like, stay focused, I guess. And I always tell people, if they're looking to sell in the future, don't take your foot off the pedal. There's no cruise control. You got to maintain a steady business. It's great if you're growing, but nobody wants a declining business, obviously. So that's one of the first things that you look at when you evaluate any type of business, I'm sure.
Yeah. Again, it's your business. You do what you want. But a declining business is a much different transaction than a thriving one.
Yeah. Well, like I said, put those things in place so you can continue to maintain stability or growth for sure. So, all right, Matt, thanks for joining. That was great. Some terms that get thrown around all the time. Obviously, the more we understand, the better off we do. So appreciate you, Matt Howard. Thanks for and thanks for everybody for tuning in to Match Play. We'll see you next round. Thanks, Matt.
My pleasure.